Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a look at Champions Festival. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on with Champions Festival is that things are getting dumb. Champions Festival is ballooning in price right now, so we need to talk about what exactly is going on and why is that happening. Now, for anyone that's interested, Champions Festival is a World promo card. It was given out at Worlds 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2022. If anybody's wondering what happened to 2020 and 2021, remember that the World Championships were cancelled those years. So basically, there have been 8 World Championships starting in 2013, and in all 8 of those World Championships, Champions Festival has been the promo. Now, what's interesting is that the 2 years before that, 2011 and 2012, we had Tropical Beach. And Tropical Beach was a problem. Tropical Beach was like a full-on, legitimate, super playable card. It allowed you to draw until you had 7 cards in your hand at the cost of ending your turn. But the thing is, there are a whole bunch of decks out there that don't really mind about ending their turn because they just want to draw a whole bunch of cards. That was the goal. So we end up in this weird situation where 2 years in a row, we have super playable cards at Worlds. And it was a problem because a bunch of decks wanted to use it. The price completely ballooned, and that never happened again. We started in 2013 with Champions Festival, and part of the reason we got Champions Festival was very simply because Tropical Beach was too good. And it really is as simple as that. Tropical Beach was an absurdly good card in certain decks, and having a card that good caused problems. So they replaced it with Champions Festival, which for years now, like I say, this came out in 2013, and I'm willing to bet there are a lot of people watching this who play the game who haven't been playing since 2013. And a lot of the point here was, let's just print an innocuous card which isn't particularly good, and they kind of agreed that it wasn't particularly good and just reprinted it year after year after year. The card reads, once during each player's turn, if that player has 6 Pokemon in play, they may heal 10 damage from each of their Pokemon. And since we had Worlds in 2013, this has not been a problem. It might now be a problem. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, it got good. And part of the reason it got good, in fact, really the reason it got good, is because Gardevoir EX became a thing. You see, Gardevoir EX has got a rather redonkulous ability that allows you to attach psychic energy from the discard to your psychic Pokemon as often as you like during your turn, and put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So what you can essentially do with Gardevoir here is put an energy on each of your Pokemon in play, and then, as long as you've got 6 in play, of course, immediately go and use Champions Festival to remove 1 damage counter from each of them. And oh look, ladies and gentlemen, oh look. Because now, essentially, instead of putting 2 damage counters on, you're only putting 1. Now, this is, of course, assuming you're only putting 1 energy on each Pokemon. We saw at the World Championship, European International Championships, talking about Worlds cards, that's very confusing. Just this past weekend, we saw stuff like the Zacian from Celebrations, which, of course, you do pile a whole bunch of energy on, and at that point, you're putting so much damage on that you're going to get 1-hit KO'd regardless, and something like Champions Festival just becomes kind of irrelevant. But you can still use it in a bunch of other situations, and that's kind of the point here. So what's happened is Champions Festival has gone from this innocuous card that isn't very good, and again, it really does need to be stated that the whole point here is that it was replacing a card in Tropical Beach that was way too good and caused a bunch of problems. And now all of a sudden, this card, because of Gardevoir, is getting a little bit too good. And if you start looking around at deck lists for Gardevoir, and we're seeing this over in Japan as well, what we are finding is that this is actually starting to see a bunch of play. Now, generally at the moment, it's seeing play as a 2-of, but there is absolutely possibility that this is going to end up going to a 3 or a 4-of in the future, and that's a little bit of a problem. You do not have to play it in Gardevoir, but it is still a good card that is starting to see a bunch of play. Now, there are other issues with this, of course, with the fact that it's a Worlds card. Because the thing is, not all regions are created equal. Now, the rule basically is you can use the language, your home language. So if you're in Japan, you have to use a Japanese version of Champions Festival. But then it gets a little bit weird. You see, in the US, you have to use an English version. Although it is worth noting that all the staff versions are English. So essentially, competitors get one of every language. And then there are staff ones out there. So if you're in Japan, you have to get a Japanese version from the player pack. 1 player pack per player at Worlds. Whereas if you're American, you can use the English version from the player pack. Or you can use a staff version, that's fine. But then the rules get a little bit weird. So in Canada, you are able to use both an English version or a French version, because French is considered a home language, because it is the official language of some regions in Canada. But in the US, you're not able to use Spanish, because although a huge number of Americans speak Spanish as their first language, it is not, I believe this is true, correct me in the comment section if I'm mistaken, it's not the official language of certain regions, which is why in Canada you can use a French version, but in America you cannot use the Spanish version. But then in Europe, any language is up for grabs, any European language. So in Europe, you can use French or Spanish or German or Portuguese or Italian. But in the US and Canada, you can't. So actually, if as a European you qualify for the World Championships, you actually end up with more than a playset of the card. But that's not a case over in the US or Canada or Japan or a bunch of other regions. So we end up with this very playable card, which is only given out at Worlds, and if you're European and play at Worlds, you're sorted, but if you don't play at Worlds or you're not European, things get very, very awkward. And that's where the price starts going a little bit nutty. Now, I should mention there are like top 16, top 8 stamped, etc. We're not talking about all of them. We're just talking about the regular ones for now. And if we head on over to TCG Player, we can see that basically there aren't any good options. I mean, there are a few that are showing market price, but these are getting a little bit silly. And I should mention, even when we're looking at the market price over on TCG Player, it's not necessarily something that you can really rely on. So if we take a look, one that looks pretty cheap at the moment is Worlds 2013. Over on TCG Player right now, we are seeing that this is apparently got a market price of $200. Yes, that is apparently pretty good. But what we've actually got is a couple of sales for around $200 that are lightly played and then are moderately played for $235. But there aren't actually any current listings, so I'm not sure if this is exactly one that we can necessarily believe. Sure, it says it's a $200 card, but the last sold was a moderately played for $230, and it's not even in stock anyway. Like, there's none that are actually available to buy, so I'm not sure it's particularly believable, quite frankly. Similarly, we can look at the 2018 version, which has a market price of $250, but the last one sold was a lightly played for $200 3 months ago, and there are none which are currently available to buy over on TCG Player. And the thing is, with cards like this that are kind of rare and awkward to buy and all of that, I'm not sure you can necessarily believe a market price based on sales that happened months ago. I mean, we could take a look, for instance, at 2016. There's actually 3 lightly played that were sold in the past few months for $85, which seems like an absolute bargain. The problem is, they presumably all sold by the same person. It's weird they're all exactly the same price, firstly, lightly played. Secondly, there's none actually available right now, and that's kind of the problem. Even where we can see they're all out of stock, and I'm not going to keep going with this. There are no Champions Festival that are currently in stock over on TCG Player, so I'm taking you through all of these. They're not actually currently in stock. I mean, if we look at English versions, for instance, we can go and have a look on Troll and Toad. There is actually a near-mint English version from Worlds 2014, which is sitting up there at $300, which from everything we've seen right now is actually a decent price, which is kind of nice. There's a moderately played from 2017, which you can pick up for as low as $270. Bearing in mind you may want to play 2 of these in your list, you may want to go up to 4. And I'm telling you that if you're lucky, you can maybe pick it up for $200 to $300. I'm hoping at this stage you can start to see the problem. You can get some European languages cheaper, especially if you're not going for fully mint. But if you're going for English versions of this card, it gets very, very, very expensive very, very, very quickly. I mean, if we head on over to eBay and have a look at solds, there are a couple that have sold recently that are English. We've got a staff version from 2017 sold for $300. The difference is you've got the staff stamp on there, which a lot of the time does make it slightly more expensive because, you know, staff and all of that. And then the other English one that sold, there was a 2013 that did actually sell for a paltry $250. These are not easy cards to find right now, and even if you can find them, trying to find an English version for $200 is extremely difficult. $300 is about what you're going to be paying for an English version right now, and this could end up staying playable. And that's my worry here. This card is ballooning in price. It's quite hard to find an actual value. It's not like cards you can pull out of a pack that we can go on TCG Player and look at the graph, because there's so few of these being sold and they're so high value that it's quite hard to actually try and figure it out. But there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we've got as it stands at the moment. If you've got Champions Path, incidentally, this is pretty a good time to sell. This is about when you should be thinking, because honestly, hype for this card is huge, price is ballooning. So there we go. That's what you need to know. And now it's over to you guys. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me if you've got Champions Festival. Tell me anything you want to tell me in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wasi. That's where we talk Pokemon card games, all kinds of fun things. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, all kinds of fun things. And of course, you can get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Star of Dav, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and for being a very lovely person. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.